In this week's news, Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter not just for the crimes he was guilty of, but for any possible crimes he may have committed between 2014 when he joined the board of Burisma and the day he was pardoned. If you've been following cable news or following along on Twitter with anyone named Nate, you would think that this was the biggest threat to democracy since it's now the reason Trump can do everything he was already going to do anyway.
Okay. So I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I know we're going to get to those. But we also sent out a focus group to many, many people to ask them about their thoughts on Joe Biden pardoning Hunter Biden. And the results were incredibly interesting, and they were very, very different from what it looks like on Twitter with this whole conversation. So I'm really excited to get to talk about that and continue the conversation of whether or not Twitter is real life.
It's really interesting you say that because when we saw the backlash on Twitter and on cable news, I thought to myself, here we go again with the double standard, because the people who had been complaining about this, who knows what they said about all of Donald Trump's pardons, and it would seem that our focus group of Democratic donors and supporters like you agrees in that 90% agree he should have pardoned his son. And I think that it's best summed up by one of our respondents who said, I think Biden was protecting his son from Trump. Trump would have done everything he could to punish Hunter.
We know that's true, too. One of the people that Trump is nominating has spent the last 4 years of his life going on right-wing media news stations to go after Hunter Biden. And I really think Joe was in this point like, I'm going to be a good dad and help my son because I don't want him to end up in jail for 50 years for something that, it's still a crime. I want to make that very clear. Hunter committed some crimes, but compared to the man who's about to take office, we got to talk about that, We got to think about that.
Also, you were talking about Kash Patel, right? The guy who Trump just named to be the FBI director, who thinks all of the FBI is corrupt and has openly said he wants to use it to go after Trump's political opponents. And I think it's a really good time to talk about what Joe Biden actually said in his statement pardoning Hunter, because we shouldn't comment on these events if we don't actually know the words that are being said. So, the statement from President Joe Biden: today I signed a pardon for my son Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making, and I kept my word even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. The charges in his case came about only after several of my political opponents in Congress instigated them to attack me and oppose my election. Then a carefully negotiated plea deal, agreed to by the Department of Justice, unraveled in the courtroom, with a number of my political opponents in Congress taking credit for bringing political pressure on the process. No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's case can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle. Just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded. Here's the truth. I believe in the justice system, but as I have wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process, and it led to a miscarriage of justice. I hope all Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision.
That's a really, really powerful statement. And I think it's also incredibly true to who Joe Biden is as a person, that helping people comes first outside of all of the other noise that's happening. I think that's a really good way to generalize what his statement is on a human level.
Not to mention, we have to take it in the context in which it's happened, because a lot of people are talking about how Joe Biden said, no, I will not pardon Hunter. I will not pardon Hunter because I believe in the justice system. We all believed in the justice system. We all thought it would work. We all thought that a man who committed so many crimes could never be elected president again. But we were proven wrong, and not just that. It's not just about the election, because I'm not trying to deny the election here. It happened. Trump won. What I think concerns Joe Biden, and what I think concerns a lot of us, is what's next. The people he's picked to be in his cabinet, he's made it clear this is going to be a reality show presidency, or a continuation of the reality show presidency we all saw. And the thing about a reality show, the thing about any TV show, but especially in reality TV, you need your villain. You need your Omarosa. You need your Johnny Bananas, whoever these guys are. Like, you need the person that all of your fans like to hate to root for your main character, for Trump and his guys to go after. And in this case, they've built quite a big villain in Hunter Biden. And a lot of people say that pardon, sweeping from when he joined the Burisma board to the day of the pardon, is overly generalized. But then again, so are the conspiracy theories that date back to that day. So is he covering up crimes, or is he protecting his son from conspiracy theorists who are taking power in government, who have openly said, we are going to go after this guy because we don't like him?
I don't have anything else to add to that. That's literally just what it is. Like, Hunter Biden is someone's son, and Joe Biden is someone's father. And if I can understand that as someone who is, I'm just a daughter of someone. I have my family, but I'm the children in my family. If I can understand this, I feel like other people need to also understand this, because I know that all the parents out there, you would all do that for your children if you were in the same position.
100%. And it's a consequence of, again, this reality TV era of politics that Trump ushered in. But who's got something else to add?
He's been sober for a long time. There's a lot of people on whom the gears of justice have turned while they were trying desperately to maintain their sobriety, and no pardons for them.
Can I just point out too, on that point, when Joe Biden decided to run in 2019, Hunter had already gone through a lot of these challenges. And so the time you could make a decision that would protect Hunter Biden from the kind of political glare and from Republican attacks was then.
I think that Joe Biden is a tragic figure. He has shown incredible decency at times, and I really feel for what he's gone through and what his family has gone through. They've gone through hell. None of us can imagine what they've gone through. But his ego, again and again, has gotten in the way. And when push comes to shove, it's I'm going to do what's good I'm going to run for president again, even though it's fucking crazy to do that. And I shouldn't do it and blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to do it, and now we're all here.
So first off, for anyone who doesn't recognize these guys, honestly, more power to you. This is Pod Save America. They launched immediately after Trump won the first time. They are the former Obama White House staff and campaign staff, and they set out to build their own media empire because they thought everyone else was doing it wrong and they could do it better. And they've grown and grown and grown, but Pod didn't save America because clearly we didn't win. And they put out a couple post-election episodes which have gotten a lot of attention on Twitter. The big news maker was when they hosted Kamala Harris's campaign staff for their first exclusive interview post-election, where they hopped on to talk about what went wrong.
I think given that we had a challenging political environment, the fact that we got the race to dead heat was positive. And I think we were focused on 7 states. But what we saw on election day was, New Jersey and California and Connecticut and New York, massive shifts. So I think where Kamala Harris campaigned, we were able to keep the tide down a little bit, but it ended up being a pretty strong, tailwind for Donald Trump. And I think it's worth reminding everybody, we saw in 22, even though that was a pretty decent Democratic year, we saw these shifts. We saw them in 20, we saw them in 16. Trump specifically, but Republicans generally improving their vote share amongst non-college voters, particularly non-college voters of color. And this was a surprising race because Kamala Harris actually did, I think, better with senior voters.
First off, 22, Democrats won because local Democrats ran the table. State-level candidates who were brand new to the scene. Those are the people we should be listening to, not this guy who, for anyone who doesn't know, that is David Plouffe. He was Barack Obama's campaign manager. And as soon as Kamala Harris became the Democratic candidate, he was brought in to be a senior advisor to rerun the Obama playbook for her. And how do you think that went, Shayna?
So I want to make a couple of notes that so far, the people that Pod Save America have interviewed have been high up executive staffers that have most definitely had to sign contracts and agreements of sorts that they can only say certain things.
Not to mention, those guys all work together.
They all work together. They know what happened. They're not going to tell you what actually happened. I think you can see the disdain in my face. I know you can't feel things through a computer screen, but I hope you can feel my like anger towards that too.
I watched, I don't know if you did, I did, so you didn't have to. I watched that podcast with the staff, and it really was just an hour and a half of them talking about how they did better than expected in the swing states compared to how bad her margin was in the non-swing states. And shouldn't that be begging the question, what was wrong with the message that she was doing that badly across the country? We got killed.
Yeah. I'm almost left speechless at some of the comments that people have to make about the election and what happened. Like, for example, we didn't do better in swing states than we thought because we lost them. I understand that, I want to make this clear too. I understand that Kamala Harris had just over 100 days to put together and run a campaign. And I think that with the time and the resources that she had, she did a great job. On the other side of that, though, all of the people who have been in this business since before I was born were brought in to help run this election. But the thing is, the tides have drastically changed since a lot of these people were in the political scene. And a lot of these people, they've been doing this longer than I've been alive. And they tried to go back and run the same old playbook that worked years ago, but everything changed in 2016. Literally everything. Up and down. We don't know which direction that is anymore. That has all changed, and it's still continuing to change and flip over and over again. We need new people and new voices. Period. That's the end of my sentence, the end of my thought. We need new people.
But wait, Pod Save America has an answer for that too, because right after this episode, which they knew was going to get flamed, they also hosted another follow-up episode with a leftist Twitch streamer named Hassan Piker, who gives you some of that more energetic fight mentality you're looking for.
The Kyrsten Sinemas, the Joe Manchins of the world, and the problem solvers caucuses within Congress in general. These guys need to get whipped into shape.
I wish I believed that. I don't know how much more you could have gotten out of Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema. I do not believe. I think we agree on a lot. I just don't believe that there is a version of the Joe Biden presidency that could have been more successful on legislative policy. I don't see that.
You're not going to appreciate what I'm about to say then.
Hit me.
Use the IRS and also the SEC and maybe even the FTC to investigate as to why Joe Manchin's brother owns a coal mine and whether there's a conflict of interest there. Investigate why Joe Manchin's daughter is selling pharmaceutical products to the state of West Virginia when Joe Manchin is directly at odds with any sort of bill that passes that would lower the cost of pharmaceuticals.
So you want the president
yes.
to politicize these agencies
yes.
and use them to go after people?
Because you want to know why?
Tell me why. Tell me why.
Because they're doing it at the behest of not only the American people.
So let me get this straight. To fight fascism, we should use another type of fascism?
Yeah, I mean, I will give Lovett some credit for sort of shooting that down. He gave him a little... I don't think it was aggressive enough there, but it really speaks to kind of the mentality that it feels like these guys have taken that worries me a little bit. Because amidst all of the Twitter fighting about all of this, the producer of Pod Save America has actually been on Twitter defending them and said something interesting. He said, Pod Save America hosted the first post-mortem with Harris's top staff, and it drove political discourse all week. The follow-up is with one of the biggest voices on the left. PSA is where the post-election conversation is happening. The brand is as strong as ever. Do we really want the future of our party's conversations to be moderated by the people who just lost us this election?
I want to make a note that I did not know who Hassan Piker was until last week. So saying that he's one of the biggest voices on the left, but I do recognize him. So I was very lucky. I got to go to the convention when it was in Chicago this year, and I got to be up in the influencer suite a couple of the nights, and I saw that there was someone streaming. I didn't know who he was though, and now I know in hindsight that was Hassan Piker. But it was interesting. I didn't get to speak to him or anything, but it was just interesting to know that I was in the same room as him as he was talking about and thinking about all of these things while there were people giving speeches about how hard we need to work to get Kamala Harris elected and fight against fascism, and that his solution was to go all the way to the other side of the horseshoe and fight fascism with fascism. And I want to bring up that last time I remember I talked about horseshoe theory. I'm going to talk about it again. You go so far one way, you end up back on the other side. I don't believe in many political theories. I think a lot of political theories at this point in time in history are moot and don't work anymore, except for horseshoe theory. It keeps getting truer and truer every day with everything going on right now.
100%. And this isn't to say that we shouldn't fight back against every authoritarian fascist thing that Trump does, but what we're seeing here is fighting authoritarianism with more authoritarianism. And that's just going to lead to civil war at some point. But in the meantime, let's focus on the things we know, which is we have spent our entire careers now working in politics in the Trump world, in this reality TV world. And it breaks my heart personally because I got into this as a fan of The West Wing growing up, thinking my life would be like that. Little did I know. But anyway, so Pod Save America, they think they have all the answers. They'll do a Q&A every Thanksgiving, holiday, Christmas mailbag, but we're going to do something a little different here at Concepts of a Pod. We're going to take supporter questions with every single episode because this conversation can't happen without you. None of this can. It's all about the supporters here.
And we're very thankful for all of the support that everyone has given us. And as promised, I said I would read through every question. I actually did. There were 8,000 questions. There were thousands and thousands of questions, but I went through and I found the questions that were asked the most and some that were really powerful, and I think will give people a little bit more insight onto how the whole political campaign government system works.
Yeah.
So I say that the first question is one that was asked probably it was in the top 3 most asked questions. And the most basic version of the question is, how do the Democrats make themselves as a party more appealing to the middle class again? And Jordan has a really good quote from John Fetterman that I think really encapsulates the answer to this, but we'll discuss it more.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. I happened to be reading an interview Fetterman did with the New York Times, but he was asked about pretty much this exactly, and he said that the Democrats' response to Trump was, aren't they smart enough to realize they're voting against their interests? And that's insulting. That's not helpful. It's condescending, and if anything, that reinforces that kind of stereotype, and he's not wrong. I know I'm guilty of having said it, that Trump voters are voting against their own interests.
Well, so here's the thing. It is true that they're voting against their own interests, but it's also true that the government has been set up in a way that people are not supposed to understand how it works. And there's all these words and legal jargon and legislative jargon that gets thrown around, tariff being one of those words, that people don't understand what they mean because it's not taught in school, whether you're in public or private schools. You don't learn about it when you're outside of school. People just kind of assume that you should know that stuff. So yes, people are voting against their own interests, but also it's the system has been created so they can't understand what their interests are and how they should voice their opinions on their interests.
Yeah, but also, at the same time, I don't think we as Democrats took enough time asking them what their interests were. Because
you're so right. We didn't ask them.
No, we told them what they were. I mean, that's us saying, aren't people smart enough to realize, is us basically saying, we know better than you what your interests are. And looking back on it, I can't think of a time that's ever been compelling when someone told me that. I mean, certainly
You can't, you can't shove things down people's throats. One of the first things that I learned when I started working on political campaigns, and it has been the number one thing that I teach everyone who joins my staff, no matter what position they are in, how long they have been working in politics, is that when you are talking to someone, you need to listen. You cannot just shove information down their throat. You need to see what they are interested in, what they understand, how they're conveying that information to you, and you need to be able to take that all in and regurgitate it and spit it back out to them in a way that they can understand. And that's not to say you should mansplain people. You should not do that. You should not over-explain, but you can explain and simplify things in a way that people understand, like how it functions, without talking down to them and without making them feel like they're smaller than you. And I unfortunately think Democrats really did that this year. It was a lot of Trump is bad. You should know why. Well, why? Oh, you should know all the things. That's not enough.
And if you don't, you're a fascist. So yeah.
Yeah, we actually, just a side comment on that, the comment you just made, there were a lot of responses that we got from people as well who they were really upset at a lot of the text messages that came in from Democrats saying, if you don't reply to this text or if you don't donate money, you're a Republican. I think that is like, yeah, that's
gotta stop. That's gotta stop. And
that was one of the things that people complained about the most when we asked, like, if you have any questions. At every focus group or survey that we send out, we always put, do you have any other thoughts? And you can put anything in there, whether it's related to the original focus group questions or not. And we've got a few of those right now. And one of the top 3 things that people said was, why am I getting called a Republican if I am not donating money or answering all of the hundreds of text messages I get a day?
And I'll answer that question right now. It's because somebody who writes all of those messages and doesn't care about anything other than how much money they raise and the percentage of it that they take for themselves, they realize that you, the viewer, are more likely to click if you think that the Democratic Party is going to mark you down as a Republican, which, no, they're not going to do that. If you're getting that text message, I promise you, we know you're a Democrat. That's why you're getting the text message.
Yes. Also, they cannot change your voter registration or your political party affiliation for you. Just want to make that real clear. Those text messages you get from all of the PACs and the Democratic organizations, they cannot change that. So if they're threatening it, they cannot change it. Want to make that real clear real quick.
If they are threatening you, they are lying to you. Like, nobody legitimate, like, I mean, if you read our messages, for example, we don't threaten you. We tell you, like, we'd love to hear from you. We really want to hear from you because you are the center of everything we do. But the sky's not going to fall down if you don't happen to be able to respond this time. And we still care about your message, even if you can't donate today. Like, I'll tell you, the number of times I read, I'm so sorry, I wish I could give, but I'm on a fixed income and I can't. Please don't feel bad. If you're one of those people, if you're listening to this, if you were one of those people who's responding that, please don't feel bad. We ask for the money because the people who do give power us, and you know whether or not you are capable of giving to this cause. And
the other thing too is that your words also power us. Your words are just as meaningful to us as when someone donates. It's the same thing as I'm going to go back to working on campaigns because I do field stuff. I don't do money. I don't deal with money. When people say, oh, I can't donate, but I can volunteer my time, the first thing I always say is thank you. Your time and your money, whether it's together or separate or one or the other, are just as powerful as anything else you could be doing right now. It's all very powerful.
I think this also leads really well into our next question. Why didn't you have a better ground game? Which, as the expert on the ground, I'll let you take this one, Shayna.
So when I saw this question, it made me really, really excited. So here's the thing. As we talked about last time in our last podcast episode, we put a clip in talking about how many doors the Harris campaign knocked just in Pennsylvania in one weekend. And you may think like, wow, millions of doors is a lot in one weekend. But here's the big thing, which we also touched on last time. I'm going to repeat a little bit of it for anyone new here. So when you go and knock on someone's door, you're collecting data. And whether they answer the door or they don't, that data needs to be put in somewhere. The problem is when you collect that data, if you don't do anything with it, you're going to keep talking to the same people you've already spoken to, whether they agree with you or not, or whether, it's the wrong person at the wrong door. You need to go through that data. So the reason there was not a better ground game is because the data was not being properly sifted through and properly updated every day. And with the amount of doors that were being knocked in a lot of swing states, that data actually probably should have been refreshed and changed every few hours. And that was not happening. I also think that there wasn't a good amount of training given to the volunteers coming to knock the doors, good amounts of talking points. And I commend all of the volunteers who were out there doing stuff. I don't want this to sound like I'm ungrateful for any volunteers who helped. My job and my livelihood runs on volunteers, but I think that a lot of the campaigns, they just didn't have enough resources to give to people to know what to talk about.
This is nothing on the volunteers. On the contrary, the volunteers are what saved us from a 400 plus Trump electoral win. And my fiance and I were part of the Kamala Harris volunteer Discord, and we were always looking for ways to help out, and the campaigns were constantly breaking. They were having data issues. They were needing to restart them and cancel them because of data problems. And unfortunately, partially a consequence of the campaign needing to be built in 100 days, but also more than that, a consequence of the Biden for president campaign before he dropped out, not having the infrastructure to manage their volunteer base. They just didn't have the capability to deal with the sudden influx of volunteers, of supporters, of people who cared so much.
These campaigns needed to have more staffers too, and they didn't have enough staffers.
The Harris campaign had an army. It was just an army of people doing all the same things, and they didn't have new innovation.
You're totally right. They were all doing the same thing. Their jobs weren't divvied up enough, of giving everyone specific tasks.
No, but there was no drive to innovate. There was no desire to innovate because there was a top-down mentality of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And fun fact, I interviewed for a job on the Biden campaign back when it was the Biden campaign last summer. And one of the questions I asked was, what is the campaign doing to drive innovation, to take risks and try new things that haven't been done before? And the answer was something to the effect of, we're just going to keep doing things that work. As long as the data suggests that what we're doing is working, we're just going to optimize that and stay the course, essentially. I don't think I've ever left a call more discouraged, and honestly, I called Shayna and said, hey, we should do something different.
And that brings us to where we are right now. But actually, it's funny you bring up this concept of why aren't things changing. Another, I would say, the top 10 comments / questions we received was why reinvent the wheel? And the thing is, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not asking the Democratic Party to reinvent the wheel. We're asking them to go from the wooden wheels originally used on cars to the new aluminum wheels that are now used on cars. You know what I mean? Like, we're asking them to upgrade and to make things that are better built and longer lasting. And they haven't been doing that.
It's more than that. I think we're really at one of those moments in politics where, and political scientists and historians will talk of the last moment that I think was the advent of television, the Kennedy-Nixon era, where, I don't know if you know this fun fact, but when John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon debated, they did 2 polls of 2 different audiences to ask who won. They asked the people who listened on the radio and the people who watched on television. The people who watched on television overwhelmingly said Kennedy won, and the people who listened on the radio said Nixon won. And it was because Nixon had been more polished in his speaking. He was a much older, much more veteran politician who had more experience. But Kennedy had the look for TV. He knew the right suit to wear. He wore the makeup. And Nixon his gray suit clashed with black and white television.
I also
So-
know that he got really nervous and was like
Oh, he was
sweaty and
sweaty,
things
yeah.
like that. No, that's actually really interesting. I knew half of that, but I didn't know that the radio versus TV viewers thought differently.
It's interesting because I think we are now in another one of those moments where, I mean, as we shifted from radio to television, we're now shifting from television to internet to, I don't even know what to call it anymore. I mean, a year ago it would have been the metaverse. That's kind of not a thing, but
My God, I forgot about the metaverse. What a fever dream that
I know,
was.
right? But yeah, anyway, it's just we're in a fundamentally different era of media, and until we get that through our heads, we did have the best ground game based on the old theory. We need a new theory.
We need new things. One of the focus group surveys that we did actually was should people stay on X, formerly known as Twitter, or like move to other places? And the results were like, I'd say that we were pretty like dead even in terms of
wasn't quite
stay
dead
versus
even.
not.
Wasn't quite dead even. That one was interesting though. I would say it was 2-1 leave versus stay. Stay was in the minority, but it was, I'd say like 25 to 30% of people said we should stay. That really goes down to, I think, and not to judge the way people are, because I think there are two types of people on social media: the ones who exist on there for themselves to feed their own desire for content, and the ones whose job it is to convince others, like me or you, or like a politician. And I think, I mean, I'm not going to fault anyone for leaving X. It's objectively gotten more annoying to use.
Yeah.
But that being said, it now is the most direct line that the public has to the White House, which is terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying. But the thing though was that people saying that we should leave Twitter were like, it was just a simple no, like boycott Elon Musk. But the people who said we should stay, almost all of them had incredibly well thought out statements as to why. And if I had to generalize all the statements, it was, well, we should fight back. You know, Democrats should be in every space. We need to reach everyone we can. I think I agree with those people in the end, but it was super interesting. And I think talking about, you know, we could reach out to people. One of the other big questions we got was, how do we help people who are low involvement voters, last minute deciders, and like low volume news consumers, and so that campaigns are more prepared for elections. On campaigns, we call these people undecided voters or low propensity voters. So what that means is these are people who can sway in like their political opinions and which way they vote, but they may not go out to vote. It doesn't mean that they care less about politics and about policies. They are just okay with whoever wins and they'll deal with it, so they don't feel like they need to go out and vote. They're a very interesting group of people to talk with and try to reach out to, because a lot of the times they don't want to be reached out to. They unsubscribe from everything as soon as they can. If you knock on their door, they're like, thanks for coming, I appreciate what you're doing, but please take me off the list. I have my opinions. I get my news from ABCD, you know, wherever, and I'll make my own opinions. So these people tend to be a little bit more independent minded, not necessarily registered as independents, but they're much more centrist, much more independent minded. And I think that the best way is to just continue to go on all media platforms and reach out to people, whether it's social media, TV, mail, radio. There's a lot of arguments for and against all of those forms of reaching out to people, but they're all incredibly important. I also realized I forgot knocking on doors, text messages, and phone calls, my livelihood, but all of those are incredibly important.
Yeah, we need to be everything everywhere all at once. And that really speaks both to the traditional media platforms that already exist, as well as the new ones that are just breaking through. We need to, I mean, Pete Buttigieg does one of the smartest things as transportation secretary. He's been doing interviews, not with traditional journalists, but actually with travel podcasters, like the people who review the airlines and the people who tell you all the hacks on how to save money. And he goes on those shows to talk about all of the great work he's doing to regulate the airlines and make sure they give you your refund when they cancel your flight. And he's done some really good public awareness. And not only does that get him out there and get him in front of people who otherwise wouldn't see him, but also now you have an influencer in a non-political sphere who really likes him. So maybe that person's audience, for example, this Erica girl who's the finance hacks girl.
Love
My
her.
God,
I
she's
follow
great.
her. I love her. She's
Did you
amazing.
see her bit with Pete Buttigieg?
Yeah, I loved her bit with Pete Buttigieg. And the first thing that when you started talking about this, I was like, I've got a good thought. Was one of the reasons that people in 2020 loved Elizabeth Warren so much was because she broke things down to an understandable level and was willing to go talk with the regular people and the regular, news sources, whatever, that some of the influencers, she was willing to go and do those things. And again, this goes back to what we talked about earlier, voter education. It's the system has been made to be like incredibly difficult to understand. And so I love that there are still people out there like Pete Buttigieg who are pushing towards making things more understandable, because that will also help those low propensity and undecided voters in the end as well. And that goes back to a better ground game and how to talk to working class people. It's all connected. It's all connected.
We need to meet people where they are and hit them on, even if there's only one issue that we have in common. Good example, like, if you were to ask me off the top of my head how to reach back out to the bros, the people who listen to Joe Rogan, who voted for Trump because Elon said so and previously weren't voting, just look at what's happening in, I think, Texas and Louisiana. And trigger warning, this is going to be a little X-rated here, around porn, actually, online. So I don't know if you know this, but the state legislatures in both Texas and Louisiana now have passed laws requiring porn websites to go through identity and age verification for all of their users to make sure people are 18, which, of course, nobody wants to give their government ID to a porn website. Like, that's just a privacy nightmare waiting to happen.
Montana actually passed a similar thing last year or 2 years ago, where you have to put in your ID to go on. I think it's specifically only Pornhub.
Yes.
But yeah, this is something that's wreaking havoc on the nation.
It's crazy, though, because what's happened now is the porn sites, the Pornhubs of the world, who naturally don't want to be responsible for maintaining everyone's data, have just decided the easier solution is just to stop the website from working in those states altogether and replace it with a big banner page that says, sorry, your state legislature took your porn away. Have a problem with it? Contact your representative, which I saw that on Twitter. It made me crack up.
Amazing. I did not know that they were that's amazing. This also reminds me of on my first campaign job, I was working on a college campus, and when I was trying to get all the frat bros to all I was doing was asking them to register to vote. I was not trying to push like democratic ideals on them. I just wanted them to register to vote. And whenever they would be like, why should I do that? My first response would be, do you like drugs? And they'd be like, yeah. And I'd be like, okay, well, Democrats want to help legalize some drugs. You know who doesn't? Republicans. They want to take them away. You should have seen how fast all those frat bros went and signed and filled out those registration forms. And here's the thing. You have to meet people where they're at. These frat bros, they want to smoke weed and drink beer in their frat house. So what are you going to do? Like, hey, you care about that? The people that you think you like, they actually want to take this away from you. You know who doesn't? Democrats. Go vote for them. It worked.
Yep. Republicans want to ban your porn. Democrats want to legalize weed.
Yeah, so like pick, choose your fighter here, and yeah, no, you got to meet people where they're at, and I think that's the great way to go into what I think is the most important question that we received. At least I personally think this is the most important question we received, which was, why are grassroots voices not sought in developing campaigns and strategies?
Wish I had the answer. I mean,
I do too. I am very lucky that all of the campaigns that I have worked on, that they found me through other, politicians or community leaders, because they liked the way that I thought. With all of the wonderful campaigns and candidates I've gotten to work for, they've come to me and said, we heard that you have good ideas. We know you have not been in the game as long as everyone else, but that doesn't matter to us. You have good, innovative ideas. Come help us. And every single one of those campaigns that have come to me like that, I've won, which I think is a pretty good track record if you ask me. But as someone who is one of those grassroots voices, it's tough when you you have really good ideas that could help on so many larger levels, but no one wants to talk to you because you don't have a big name, you don't have a lot of money, you aren't old enough, you don't have this, you don't have that. In the end, from experience, I can tell you that most of that doesn't matter. And I think you also can speak to that too.
Yeah, and I think I can speak to it from the flip side, where I came at this from the grassroots mass fundraising side of it, those text messages that nobody likes. I had been doing some of that stuff for years, and in all of that, I always asked my higher ups, why don't we ask people to respond? Why don't we read the things people say? And it's like some combination of, we don't have time for that, the money isn't there, we just need to raise more money. The most help we can be is by raising more money, and the quickest way to do that is just by continuing following the data and sending more of what works. And it's just, data can be deceiving, and you don't really get into why people feel the way they feel unless you ask them. And I mean, it always broke my heart to hear that there wasn't time for that. When I did, I called Shayna to complain about it, and after
now that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're taking the time to do that. And if you want to hear more about our thoughts on how data can be like misleading, I really recommend you go watch our last podcast episode. We talked a little bit about that in a little bit more depth. But yeah, it's really sad to see that there aren't more grassroots voices at the moment. But I really, really think that's going to change, especially when we have new leaders such as Jasmine Crockett, who's quickly becoming one of my favorite elected officials ever.
She's awesome. Also, she responded to one of my tweets, which shows that she actually listens to people online. And I always trust the people who interact with their supporters online. And to that end, why are there not more grassroots voices? Because we haven't heard them yet. And New Digital Now is here to change that. So do you want to be heard? Link in the description below. We have our Q&A for the next episode, which will also ask you to let us know what topics you want to hear about, as well as what kind of guests you'd want us to interview, because we plan to bring on all kinds of different voices to hear as many different perspectives as possible. We want to know what you want to hear. So if you like what you're hearing, if you want to hear more, like and subscribe, and click the link in the description to submit your questions, comments, and share your thoughts with us.
And thank you so much again for watching and supporting us. As always, when you fill out any of the surveys or you click on our links, we will ask for a donation. That is part of what helps power us. We're thankful for every donation that we get. We are also thankful for every comment that we get and every question that we get. We are thankful for anything to help continue to power our movement and that you support us.
Yes, donations are not required, but they will unlock you instant access to our supporter Discord server. So if you want to chat with us more and share more, click to donate after you fill out the focus group.
And when you're in there, I promise, anytime you ask a question, we'll start going off, and you'll get to hear all of our conversations as to what leads up to the podcast and how it all happened. So you'll just get to hear a lot more of us.
Thank you so much for listening.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.